Women should be thankful because men are doing a boring job while they can be at the university, study culture, arts, music, and meantime, men are busy working. In other words, taking on the role of being the provider. So we should be grateful, right? Well, I don't think so. But those were the words of former Mexico President Vicente Fox, which he said on a stage he shared with me earlier this year, where I had just finished presenting on how to create workplaces that foster gender inclusion. So imagine I'm a Latina immigrant who's been 30 years in the US doing everything she can to succeed in her career, helping other women by building a company that supports their career growth. What would you have said to him? How would you have reacted? Well, I was in shock. This kind of thinking is what perpetuates the gender equity gap that we have ongoing, and that according to the World Economic Forum estimations prior to COVID-19 was going to take 257 years to close. Look, I'm all for celebrating small incremental victories. Hey, we are at 7% of women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, an all-time record from 3% 10 years ago. But that's still a very, very small number. It's 37 women of 500 jobs. And you know what? There's not one Black woman or one Latina woman on that list. So 10 years ago, I said enough is enough. We cannot continue with these little levels of improvements every 10 or 20 years. And we cannot continue to be happy with this, to be content. I was looking for something to push us towards a global leap of consciousness, a tipping point beyond which the levels of inequalities we have right now would become unthinkable, unfathomable. So I started doing research in search for inspiration and looked at problems that were seemingly intractable for a long time until they were overnight resolved with a simple idea. And that's when I stumbled upon fatal medical errors. Yes, the death rates due to infections in hospitals that seemed to be intractable for a long time, until Dr. Peter Pronovost decided to try the checklist. So he created and implemented a simple checklist for medical personnel to go over before inserting intravenous lines in the ICU, one of the top places where infections start. And guess what? 10 days later, the error percentage went from 11% to 0. Yes. And in that hospital, they estimated that they saved 8 lives. So if a simple checklist could save lives, don't you think I could find something to make it my own checklist so that we can reach equality overnight? So I created my own version of the checklist. A day of the week when we all talk about and create concrete actions around gender equity until we move the needle once and for all. We had the perfect platform to implement this idea because at the Wretched movement, we do leadership development powered by a global community of women and men allies who support each other for career success. So in 2012, we established Wretched Tuesday. Supported by 7 principles, we launched an invitation for people to wear red shoes, socks, and accessories to work on that day so that we have a wave of red coming into our organizations, and we normalize this conversation on gender equity every week. So in other words, 24 hours to change the gender equity reality. So here's how the magic works. As more and more associates walk into your organization, show up with red accessories, the top brass has a tough time not engaging with this conversation and making sure that we all create very concrete and effective ways to solve for gender equity. So it's a wave that becomes contagious and elicits such level of motivation on both men and women that it helps create this global leap of consciousness that is my dream. And the secret is not just that Wretched Tuesday is a fun, enjoyable way to engage on a topic that frequently makes people uncomfortable. The secret is that it's backed by 7 very commonsensical principles. Then when you implement them in your organization, it really changes culture pretty quickly. And the principles are: mentor younger or less experienced women, offer opportunities to women who are eager to learn, provide honest feedback to women in your network and avoid hurtful comments or unnecessary criticism, cultivate the relationship with women on your team, celebrate the accomplishments of women publicly, refrain from bad-mouthing women, and avoid using labels that contribute to stereotyping women. As simple as the 7 principles are, they have the power to create culture change when you implement them in an organization. Take Patricia, for example, a real person who in 2015 was a junior associate at Microsoft Guatemala, a small country in a small region for a global player like Microsoft, from which it was hard to become known by the higher-ups and fulfill her ambitious career goals. She started following and teaching Wretched Tuesday and the 7 principles, first to her own team in her own company, then traveling to other Central American countries, then fielding requests from Microsoft partners to come and talk to them about it, and eventually to organizations that she supported outside of Microsoft. She developed mutual mentoring relationships with her colleagues. She started celebrating publicly the accomplishments of other women. She sought and got very good feedback, effective feedback, and found sponsors for herself. And very soon, she was very well known in the entire Latin American region. Whoever you ask about Patricia, they know exactly who you're talking about. But as inspiring as Patricia's story is, it's by no means a one-off. There are many, many men and women who become spontaneous ambassadors and who are both originators of and part of this wave that has ripple effects on the entire ecosystem. In other words, a contagious movement, a completely different way of tackling the gender equity issue at the highest levels of decision making. Companies like Novartis Pharma that joined us a few years ago with their Latin America and Canada regions have now expanded to Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, etc., and have become themselves inclusion leaders in the industry because of the work they're doing, not just internally, but to impact their entire ecosystem. Being an active part of this pushing for a global leap of consciousness is what makes all the difference, because we all have an active role to play in changing the policies and procedures that have fostered the current gender inequalities. This is a joint movement, one in which men and women walk side by side. When men realize how critical they are in making everyone feel included in our organizations and how much they have to gain by being part of this process. So, do you want to know what I said to former Mexico President Fox as a response to his comments that day on the stage? I said, look, it's not that women need to feel grateful that men have taken the role of the providers. When we reach gender equity, men will be able to stay home with their kids if that's what they want, or take time off to welcome a new family member, even study art if that's their dream career, something they haven't been able to do because they have the role of the provider, without paying a social penalty as many are paying today. Because when we reach gender parity, gender equity, all of us will be able to study whatever we want, go as far as we want in our jobs, and play whatever role we want to play at home. So, whenever people ask me what day of the week it is, I always say Tuesday, because I live in an endless Tuesday, in a time loop. What would you do? Will you join us and help us take this leap of consciousness to reach gender equity once and for all? Thank you.